My biggest learning through that experience was letting the technology team lead because they really have the knowledge and the gathering and they've done the hands-on work. They really know what they're talking about. But also learning to be able to capture what they are saying and be able to put it into words that are relevant to the overall industry and the layman like myself, for example.
Welcome to the Pantrium Podcast. Here, there's no fluff and no sales pitches, just real conversations. I'm your host, Kristensen, and at Pantrium, we bring together bold and curious founders and leaders to share their stories, the lessons they have learned, and the hard truth behind their success. We are all about challenging the status quo and explore fresh perspectives while focusing on what really matters: people. If you're craving deeper conversations, you're in the right space. So let's dive in.
Srishti, thank you so much for joining the Pantrium Podcast. I am thrilled to have you here.
Hi, Christy. It's wonderful to be here as well today. And I'm very excited. It's been a couple series of good podcasts that you've launched so far. So I'm quite excited to be your next speaker.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And as you know, before each episode, I ask my guests to think about a fun fact to introduce themselves. So with no further ado, Srishti, what's your fun fact?
So fun facts is something I'm really into right now is winter bathing, as they call it in Denmark. Coming from California, having grown up in the US and with Indian nationality originally, but American, I find it quite interesting and exciting. The first time I saw people taking an axe and cutting through the ocean and getting in, I was shocked. I've been pretty surprised with myself, but the last I swam was last week in the ocean before I had a trip to Stockholm. So that's my new fun adrenaline rush, and it's quite exciting.
Amazing. And how does that feel afterwards?
You know, the reason why I do it is because the first time I swam, the water was 10 degrees Celsius, and I didn't think I'd be able to do it. And the whole day, I felt so positive and energized. My body was tingling and it just felt so good. And I think that feeling, the adrenaline rush and the positivity is what kept me going every week through all the different weathers. The summer was enjoyed and longer times in the water. But this last couple of weeks have been harder to get in, but super exciting after.
Oh, that is amazing. I guess that is the first health tip in the Pantrium Podcast. Can you tell us a little bit more about your career journey and what you've been through?
My career has actually had an interesting path. My education was all in human physiology in my undergrad, so my bachelor's degree, and then my master's was in entrepreneurship, which is the business side, and biotechnology. And that's where I really formed my interest in the business world and how exciting and impactful people can do things in the business world and what they can bring to the overall society. I also realized my capability as doing leadership abilities and being able to talk to people and having a reaction and also working across different sides. The combination of an engineering and a business degree gave me a good insight into how I could bridge the gap, something that is quite a challenge in the industry. A lot of times the technical people are speaking a language that is different from the business people, and no one's really kind of communicating something that's going through. So that was something that got me excited about working in the tech industry overall. I started my career path working at a large tech R&D company in the US, and I led cybersecurity for the US government. And that was very exciting. I did that for about 7 years, and I got to travel the world and had clients across Europe and North America. And of course, they were all global clients impacting the global organization as a whole. And that was very exciting. And then closer to like my 7 years time frame, I started getting more and more interested with fintech, which was just coming in the fintech industry. So that was when the credit card industry had already been established. And at that point, it was the platform industry. So account to account, real-time payment transactions. Those were kind of getting to become a buzzword. And that's when I came to know RS Software and got interested in what the company was doing and launching in the platform industry. So I joined RS in 2014. And since then, I started with business development, just focusing in the United States, but then that quickly developed into a global role. So I've been living in many places globally And that's been very interesting and challenging as well. So in the last 10 years with RS Software, I've spent a couple of years in the US, a couple of years in India, Asia Pac, so Japan and India, and then a couple of years in the UK, then in Denmark, then in Toronto in Canada, and then now back in Denmark.
Wow.
So it's been a wonderful journey in leading the business development, strategic partnerships, market-facing opportunities that the company has had in this transition to a platform company, which is very exciting.
And I got almost dizzy hearing all those countries you've been living in.
It's a lot of countries.
Tell me a little bit about those challenges you mentioned. How has it been moving countries, working globally? Like, what has been the biggest challenge for your career?
So there's cultural nuances across the different countries that you work with. People work very differently, for example, in Japan or in India versus North America. Canada and the US in some ways have similarities, but even Canada is quite different in many ways. The US can be a lot more disparate. Canada can be top 5 major banks is what controls the ecosystem. And then Europe, every country has its own cultural experience. And when I say culture, I don't just mean for the overall society. I also mean working culture and environment and how things are accomplished. The Nordics, for example, have a very different way of going forward when they take a decision, even though it varies across, for example, Sweden and Denmark and Norway, versus like if you look at Southern Europe, the way decisions are made and how fast they can be reacted to happen in very different ways. So RS Software today, 40% of the digital payment transactions that take place globally happen on platforms that RS Software has built. So we've gotten a good flair, and my experiences have gotten a good range of countries to be able to focus with and clients. And I think the biggest challenge has been in terms of maneuvering those aspects. A big part of the industry overall is trust. And that's the biggest part of trust, of course, is the consumer when they're transacting. But this trust aspect is also huge when you're looking at companies that you're working with, clients that you're working with across the globe. So gaining that trust requires a huge understanding of how the cultural elements are, how people really listen, what they value. So looking at what they value is very important. And then being able to bring out the right aspects of your solution. Our company is very good at engineering and technology, but being able to articulate those in the right methodology for each specific country and client, I think has been probably the biggest challenge.
When you say understanding their culture, but also establishing that trust, can you give us some examples of where you have been super surprised with the way you have kind of had to establish that trust in certain markets?
In a very nutshell, for a 5-year-old child to understand, for example, every time you pay for something, the transaction, the software processing behind it is enabled through solutions built by us. And when we launched as a platform industry, the product company, working in Japan, for example, has a very different cultural element, and building the trust, being able to articulate use cases that can really be functional in that environment. So not just in Japan, in any country or the Nordics when we're talking to them as well. So when I say establishing the trust, it's being able to showcase that we really understand what this current environment is offering and what use cases would be relevant to this environment. And I think that knowledge and showing in something of value to the client. For example, when we were able to kind of paint the picture of the use case of what it would look like. So one of the major networks was looking at Bluetooth technology and whether that would have a role or not in payments. And so this was several years ago. And so I led an innovation workshop where I asked that network to bring networks like, for example, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, JCB networks. I asked them to be able to bring a cross-functional team across the organizations. So everyone from HR to finance, to products, to marketing, to engineering, to tech, and everybody in the same room where we could iterate in small round tables. They started the innovation workshops with an info session. So I had our head of innovation from the company, Sumit Mishra, coming in and leading an innovation workshop where we had planned and iterated across 2 weeks to look at what are the use cases for Bluetooth in the payments area. And then we It gave a knowledge session in terms of what that is. So what is the technology? What does it do? What are the use cases? And then we had the teams deliberate across their sections. And this created a really nice way for them to be able to deliberate all within the room. This is over for 2 days. And then we took in the information gathered and created a white paper, which summarized all of the different discussions that took place and also gave our thought as a payments leader and gave a recommendation overall, whether we recommend Bluetooth as an use case for payments and technology right now for that network or not. And that really helped for the company to be able to understand what value we can bring across the industry.
Working across different countries, what has been some of the biggest challenges?
So some of the biggest challenge in my career path was being able to launch the largest real-time payments platform that exists today. So Unified Payment Interface is the real-time payments. Global RFPs were put out, and this is like all the leaders that we had worked with over the years that bid for this RFP, and so did we. And we won. And that was a big challenge that we had. So our technology team had spent hours innovating in our innovation lab and looking at, and this was possible because we had established our innovation lab about a decade before that. And that's where we were able to take in all of the non-confidential information learned through the various experiences we had with our clients, and then be able to create a knowledge repository, create accelerators and tools. And the idea behind that initially was that our clients would then benefit from having accelerators to be able to get faster time to market and lower their cost, increase their efficiency, one of the key drivers and KPIs for most of our clients. But this developed into a full-fledged architecture for a real-time payments platform. And that is what we bid for the RFP, and we won. And then the challenge didn't stop there. It was very exciting for building. You can imagine the kind of scale, the kind of security, the entire landscape had to be developed, and all in a very short window. So my role in working with the team, the innovation team, the technology team, making sure we're staying current and on point to what is the need, but also how we can bring in our expertise and learnings from the global market, but making it specific and current to the market there. So there were various nuances, various long hours, various challenges that were faced, but it was very exciting and very rewarding.
That's amazing. And what would you say as professional, personally, what was your biggest learning through that experience?
So my biggest learning through that experience was letting the technology team lead, because they really have the knowledge and the gathering, and they've done the hands-on work. They really know what they're talking about, but also learning to be able to capture what they are saying and be able to put it into words that are relevant to the overall industry and the layman like myself, for example. So I think that nuance was the biggest learning from this journey, because that's really the gold, like the gold in the mine is right there. And being able to really extract that information from these thought leaders and then be able to use it and apply to the use case. Another big learning was how is it relevant? So I attended a course at Stanford University in California, focusing, because there's a big design school at the Stanford University, and I focused a lot on the product market fit. And so, for example, when the iPhone came out, there wasn't a need decided in the industry that, oh, we really need an iPhone. It was something that was introduced into the environment. And it's only when people saw that being introduced, so then there was a huge analysis done on the product market fit. And then when that got introduced, that's when people realized they needed it. And now people kind of call, and Apple, me included, I have all Apple devices, as a cult where you've just kind of gotten into this ecosystem and you can't live without it. So it's very important when you're looking at a product to be able to have the right product market fit. And to do that, you have to be able to match the capabilities that you have internally, what that means, and then how that applies to the environment at large.
And what does product market fit mean to you?
So if you have something that's really good, but there's no use case for it, then it kind of has no value. Doesn't matter how good it is. In India, when people used to make bill payments, they would stand in line for hours to be able to then go in and pay, most likely with cash. And that's how their bills were paid. Living in the Nordics, you probably can't even imagine how that kind of environment would exist. So we built a national bill payments platform, which took into the use cases that we had learned from globally from our work. For example, request to pay as a feature, which is a big focus on the European banks to be built into their environment now. We launched with this when we launched the bill payments platform. And this capability really enhanced the entire experience. So the solutions that were built had to be non-complex from a user's use point, but very complex from a back-end point because it had to be able to handle the scalability, the security, and the fraud management in a real-time place and be able to handle the consumer experience of it so that it would be easy to use. So that's when I say product market fit was really being able to analyze how the environment is currently functioning, how the people are currently going, what would they need, and then being able to use the best technology solutions that you can find and being able to create a future-proof a product, which is not easy. You have to see what will come into the future.
And how do you play with connecting to the consumer to figure out that product fit?
So there's various ways going out into the real market and talking to people and kind of seeing what are the main pain points. So I, for example, from a market-facing perspective, attend conferences and events globally and be able to see what is happening in the industry and be able to bring that. So we iterate continuously in our innovation lab in bringing in what kind of new technologies are there, what are people focusing on in terms of like bringing up, what are some of the problems and use cases that people are seeing globally. So bringing in all of that data and really being able to analyze it and discuss it. We regularly have consultants from SMEs from various parts of the world that come in and have a conversation with us. Do that is, I think, very essential for us to be able to remain current and also for us to be able to create something that can work in the future.
And as we look at kind of your experience and your learnings and what you have kind of gathered throughout your career, your knowledge bank per se, what would you advise others to think about as they scale or as they go into a new market, launch new solutions, new products?
So this is, of course, something, Christy, that's your expertise with your background, with what you have done. But from my experience, I can share, I think gaining trust in the market that you're targeting is very important. Payments industry is all about trust. So our software, for example, we have been chosen as the incumbent again and again. We're the only company that worked with Visa for 20 years. How we delivered, what was the quality, what is the satisfaction of the client. So we check in on a regular basis. And several of our clients are comfortable with being able to give a reference as well in terms of what we have accomplished for them. So that speaks volumes from us from a product perspective. So when we establish trust, what I mean is that going in really deep. So our CEO always says inch wide, mile deep. So really deep into each customer and being able to focus on them. Because we're a small organization, we're able to give the complete deep focus to our clients and be able to accomplish really what they need. And once we're able to achieve that and then get subsequent projects with them, we can use that as real data. So not something that's made up of statistics from reports or something. We can use that as real data when we approach other clients and tell them what we have really accomplished. And share the story with them. And I think the real aspect of it is what you can see in the passion of our leaders in innovation in products, in our CEO, and hopefully in me as the market-facing executive of the company.
And now when you mentioned that, you go deep, when you talk about the relationship with your customers, how big of a value does that have for you and how do you do that?
So it's huge. That relationship is everything. The customer comes first, and that's our motto all over our organization as well. So there's various ways that we build relationships with our customers. We engage in a lot of knowledge sharing sessions. So we voluntarily put together information that we think could be relevant to them and be able to share in terms of what we have seen across the world and then how they could benefit from that. So that's for our existing customers. We, of course, engage with them in various conversations in terms of how they're progressing, what kinds of challenges that they might be facing. The availability and reliability aspect of the company is a very huge focus for us. There have been various times where we have been able to accomplish timelines that no other vendor has been able to. So I think that kind of genuine hard work in delivering that scalability and efficiency for our clients and being relevant in the industry, I think is what really makes them feel happy when working with us.
Yeah. And I really enjoy listening to you on that because I'm personally a big believer of the relationship. So it was great to hear, putting some words on that. Something stood out to me that you said, timeline, that you were able to meet timelines that perhaps others were not. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
We actively focused and worked really hard on remaining nimble. So many of our team members, we work in a very entrepreneurial fashion where the goal is to get it done, no matter what it takes. So whether it's working through weekends and weeknights, sometimes in a short time span, we're able to accomplish that. Where we have a pool of SMEs across the globe and consultants and part-time people. So we're able to bring them in on board if we need to quickly scale and be able to deliver something. So I think that because we are able to give that deep focus to our client, we're able to accomplish something that larger vendors have not been able to.
How do you diversify your portfolio? When you talk about relationship, that's part of your recipe and this effort of being very, nimble, but also focused on what you offer and not deviate from it, I suppose. What would you say is some of the biggest learnings from that and advice you would give for others?
So I think it's also very important to have a diverse portfolio of the types of clients that you do have, be able to choose the work that you can and want to do, and then be able to also create a diverse portfolio of the various different kinds of clients. At this time, we have various types of diverse portfolio across the globe, but that was something that we, of course, worked upon and being able to build over the last decade. And so I think that would be a big learning, but it's hard to do because if you're a small company and you're getting a lot of business from one or two or three major clients, it's hard to say, oh, we'll only take on this much and then take on somebody else.
Yeah, and also you might not put all your eggs in one basket, but also the power of no. How do you balance that?
Yeah. So in order to balance that, we have to choose strategically in terms of what projects we take on and put our focus and our attention on. We have regular discussions with our board members. We are a public company, and also look at the strategy of the company in terms of where we're going and what direction we want to go in. So we have repeatedly chosen the payments industry. We had McKinsey come in and do some work with us and then looked upon the outlook of the payments industry. Even at EBA Day, for example, in Portugal, there was a conversation, will payments continue to be relevant as a key industry element? And the consensus amongst the largest banks was that it will. We get validated and revalidated on our strategy on a regular basis.
If we were to switch gears a little bit, throughout your whole career, Owen, what has been some of those aha moments where something turned out different than what you had expected it to?
My very first manager was somebody who was comfortable putting people on the spot. She was great. She really pushed me to grow. She really had me speak up in meetings and show my voice. I couldn't be more grateful for that because that's what led me to be able to come into leadership roles, not just in the company I'm working for, but also in the industry overall.
And what does leadership mean to you?
Leadership, I think, is where you're able to bring your experience and create impact on other people's lives. And that can be the actual people that you're managing and helping to grow. There can be people just in the overall environment and ecosystem. It could be in organizations like industry-specific organizations, for example, Women in Payments. And I think to me, leadership is when you're a leader, you're creating an impact on somebody or something. And I think that's very much the benefit of that.
Yeah. And what has been some of the biggest learnings through your own leadership roles and through your career as a leader?
I think it's very important when we get into leadership roles, we can get a little bit egocentric. And I think it's actually the mark of a good leader of being able to manage somebody who's smarter than them and who can bring more to the table. Having the ability, the humbleness to be able to grow your colleagues who could be intellectually smarter than you, I think is a huge step in the leadership game. I would encourage people to be able to hire and grow individuals who have a higher intellectual capacity from them. And it is a huge learning for us as well. Overall, the accomplishments of the team is the accomplishment of the leader as well.
Yeah. And to switch gears a little bit, looking into the future, what would you love to see change in your sector?
So that's I'd like to see stronger push for global interoperability in payments. I think despite advances in technology, payments remain fragmented because of borders and legacy systems. So leaders like Christine Lagarde, who's the president of the Central European Bank, they've emphasized the need for a unified digital euro framework. I think this vision needs to be expanded globally so that it's not just across the euro. The world ideally would be a truly seamless cross-border payments network that would not only reduce friction, but also drive financial inclusion and empower business and fuel economic growth worldwide.
Where do you think we will be when it comes to payments 5 years from now?
So I think a few years from now, it would be really nice to be able to see, I think, some of the key aspects that we discussed today is in terms of AI. I think that's going to revolutionize the fraud detection, for example, credit decisioning, customer personalization. I think central bank currencies, so CBDCs, will be like they're driven by leaders, for example, Christiana from IMF, and they introduce new dynamics to the payment landscape and balancing innovation with regulations. I think customer expectations around sustainability will grow. So ESG is already becoming a focus among the different organizations. I think this will continue to grow and then inspired by thought leaders like Bill Gates, emphasizing how the financial sector can contribute to solving global environmental challenges and issues around financial inclusivity. So I think that's the next few years in terms of the real areas of trends that I think will be major focuses, especially for this industry.
Yeah. When you are looking for fresh perspectives or being challenged or inspired, who do you follow these days?
So I follow several experts who challenge my perspective on payments and digital ecosystem. Chris Skinner consistently provides sharp insights onto the future of banking and fintech. David Birch, who's also a good friend, is a leading voice on the intersection of digital identity and financial systems. Another person well known within the organization is Mr. Ajay Banga, the president of the World Bank, who used to be at MasterCard. Leadership in both MasterCard and global development. He demonstrated the impact of aligning payments, innovation, and societal transformation. Satya Nadella, with his vision for AI and digital ecosystems at Microsoft, I think really showcase how technology can define industries. And then, of course, you're looking at the Visa Europe CEO, Charlotte Hogg, and focusing on collaboration, customer centricity, and payments. I regularly enjoy learning from various leaders. I really enjoy learning from different people and real stories of how people have been able to accomplish. I also really enjoy the Women in Payments organization because as a woman with a family with two young children, an executive in an organization, and a keen desire to grow in the industry, I really enjoy learning from other women in terms of how they have broken the glass ceiling and been able to grow, as well as being able to see the challenges faced by both men and women to be able to handle the different nuances in the industry. It's not easy. It's a very competitive landscape. And so I think when I'm able to see these different leaders, it gives me inspiration on hard days and a desire to continue and new things to try. I mentioned this different things to try every day. I think some of those ideas come from these people.
What is some of your takeaways or learnings that you would love to share with others?
So one thing that I found interesting, I heard from a lot of the women when I spoke to them across different companies, was that women make it hardest for other women to succeed. And I found that very interesting because you would think that if we had gone through a certain challenge, we would want to be able to help. But that's starting to change. The 2 years I spent in Toronto, it was very exciting to see how many women were in executive roles. This is, of course, time I saw that was when I moved to Denmark, and I saw how the Nordics, because the environment works so well here with childcare, with different aspects. The way I say it, everything just works in Denmark. But when I moved to Toronto, I really got to be able to see that across the different organizations. Even at one of our strategic partners, Deloitte, the head of payments there, Todd, really focuses on women being able to grow. So that's a male leader who's taken on the initiative of being able to see his female counterparts growing. And I think that was all very inspiring. So I think from my perspective, I would want to be able to hear both male and female voices, but not being able to distinguish based on gender, I think is very important. Another aspect that I think was also brought up was that very often women feel the need to have to be like men or dress like men or sit like men. And I think that many of them said that maybe that's not needed. We can embrace our womanly aspects and accomplish things in a room differently from how men accomplish. And then I think together, men and women can bring their best capabilities and accomplish a lot more together.
Yeah, I second that. Who are leaders that have made a big impression and impact on you?
So I mentioned my first manager, Lynn Gilfillan at SRI, was absolutely amazing. And I was 21 years old when I started working with her to help me grow within a large organization and take on a role that was probably 7 to 10 years ahead of my career path at that point. Our CEO is very entrepreneurial focused and has really kind of showcased the need for learning and education as being a central point. But I have several friends, colleagues, my husband, who demonstrate on a regular basis what leadership really means. And I mean across industries. Like one of my good friends is a teacher. One of my good friends is really growing in the cybersecurity Secret Service space in the US. And then I have several across the industries. And you, Christie, as well, have shared various insights from yourself in terms of how you lead and what you've accomplished.
Thank you so much. We could continue hours from now to discuss, but we have covered so many.
And we could.
And we have covered so many great topics, and time is unfortunately out. Srishti, it has been absolutely a joy to have you on the Pantrium Podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christie.
If this episode gave you something to think about, I'll be really grateful if you could share this with your LinkedIn network. And to make sure you don't miss out on any new episodes, simply follow Pantrium wherever you are listening or watching. And just a note, the opinions and views shared by our guests are entirely their own and don't necessarily represent the businesses they work for. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, bye for now.